I saw a video a while back by the channel Alpha Media with a test for the quality of a band. Originally written in an article by Stephen Hayden for the AV Club, the test is whether a band has a 5 album run of great albums. Bands may have 5 or more great albums, but to have 5 albums in a row of great quality shows not only the fact that a band is able to produce great music, but are able to do that consistently. I thought it would be fun to look at some bands that did make it, in my opinion, as well as some bands that nearly made it but didn't for one reason or another. Band that pretty obviously made it was Iron Maiden, but what albums would I pick? Their run of albums in the 80s is almost perfect, but I feel like I would go for the run starting with the debut until Power Slave. The debut has a raw sound, but still some of their best songwriting, in my opinion. Killers show the band experimenting more with their music and writing some of the most complex songs. Number of the Beast introduced Bruce Dickinson, allowing the band to write more anthemic and grander songs with his bigger range in his vocals. Peace of Mind shows the band continuing this sound with the help of Nico McBrain on drums. And Power Slave is this band's creative peak, with songs like Aces High and Rhyme the Ancient Mariner being some of their most popular to date. Now, I could have gone with the run that includes Somewhere in Time and Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And while I do love those 2 albums, I personally prefer the Diano albums and love the raw edge he brought to the band. The point here is that Iron Maiden's first 7 albums is a historic run and might be the best on this list. Black Sabbath were a band I thought would definitely make it, but they seem to always have albums that I feel just slip below the great line. While I know it's an unpopular opinion, I really don't like Paranoid as much as everyone else does, which boxes in the 70s albums along with Technical Ecstasy, which just isn't a very good album. The other run I had in mind was the Tony Martin era. I personally feel that Eternal Idol, Headless Cross, and Tear are some of the best of their career, and think Cross Purposes is just good enough to fit the criteria, but, and I know this is another unpopular opinion, I don't think Dehumanizer is a great album either. If Paranoid or Dehumanizer were a little bit better, Black Sabbath would have an easy ride into this with one of the best discographies in metal. But unfortunately, they just miss out on the criteria for me. A newer band that make an interesting case for this video is Gojira. From Master Sirius, Way of All Flesh, the Sausage album, and Fortitude all easily get the great rating from me. But then we come to Magma. Magma's a pretty divisive album in the Gojira fandom, and for me especially, an album I've gone back and forth on since getting into the band. But as of now, I think it makes the cut. Songs like Stranded and Silvera are some of the best of their career, and I do like the emotional weight that this album has. Voivod are another band with a large run of albums that could also make the cut. From the debut all the way to Outer Limits is a 7 album run that's one of the best in history, so which 5 do I go with? While I absolutely adore the rough and raw feel of the first 2 albums, I'm going to have to leave them out and go for Killing Technology to Outer Limits. This shows the band moving from the raw and chaotic thrash of the mid 80s on Killing Technology into becoming one of the first prog metal bands with albums like Dimension Hatros and Nothing Face. Both Angel Rat and Outer Limits also show the band having one of the best transitions into the 90s for any thrash band, which makes this the ideal run for me personally. Another thrash band that didn't quite make the list was Metallica, but it's not for the album you might expect. The first 3 pretty unanimously make it for most people, but then we get to Justice and the Black Album. Most fans would say the Black Album ruins the run, but I in fact would go the other way. The Black Album for me is a great metal album, and not the sellout it's often seen as by many metal fans. Songs like Struggle Within and The God That Failed are some great bangers, and The Unforgiven is one of my favourite ballads of all time. Justice, on the other hand, is always an album I've had just a bit of an issue with. While yes, I hate the fact there isn't any bass, my main issue with the album is the length of the songs. A lot of the songs like To Live Is To Die and The Shortest Straw could be cut in half, but songs like Dyer's Eve, the title track, and Blackened do make me think it could make the list. Maybe one day it will grow me enough to make me think it is great, but for now, it just falls below the standard that takes Metallica out of the running for this list. Band that nearly didn't make it was Paradise Lost, but the run from Gothic to 1 Second fits snugly between 2 albums I don't think are too great, and it's one hell of a run. Gothic is some of the best death doom ever. Shades of God shows the band going more into their melodic sound. Icon proved this band could get rid of death metal and lose none of their heaviness. Draconian Times is my personal pick for their best album, and 1 Second has the band including techno and synth elements that give their sound some good layers to it. Speaking of gothic music, Depeche Mode are another band that made it by just a hair. Some Great Reward shows the band maturing with songs about BDSM and suicide. Black Celebration has some amazing atmosphere. Music for the Masses is the natural peak for this band using synths. Violator has a darker sound and more of a rock edge without losing any of their atmosphere. And Songs of Faith and Devotion is an album that nearly killed the band, but they came out with an absolute work of art. Now that you get the idea of the list, let's speed through some bands and I'll say whether I think they fit this list or they don't. Both Van Halen and Slayer's first 5 albums easily fit into this. For Van Halen, while a lot of people say that Diver Down does take it out of the running, songs like Little Guitars and Hang 'em High make me think that album is still great. Slayer's first 5 albums are some of the best thrash ever, and while the band would sharply decline in quality not too long after this, their first 5 albums is an all-timer run in metal. Another band that started with their best foot forward is Children of Bodom, and while some argue that Something Wild isn't as great as the others in the run, I disagree and think this could be the best first 5 albums for any band ever. Judas Priest is a band I have to bring up considering they're one of my favourites of all time, but once again, they just fall short. Their 4-album run from Sad Wings to Killing Machine is amazing, but in my opinion, both Rock'n'Roller and British Steel just aren't good enough to keep the run going, in my opinion. If you included live albums here, they would easily get in with Unleashed in the East, but with this rules, they just miss out. Motorhead are similar in this, where they have a great run from Overkill to Ace of Spades, and Another Perfect Day and Orgasmatron fit. Iron Fist just isn't up to snuff. It isn't bad and the title track's a classic, but it isn't good enough to make this run work in my opinion. The world of prog rock has a couple that fit here too. You could basically pick any Rush album from the debut to Grace Under Pressure, but my run will be from 2112 to Moving Pictures. This showed the band going into their more progressive sound, before simplifying it down and making 2 of the most accessible yet amazing prog albums ever. Genesis are another band that fit. A lot of the people say Trick of the Tail ruins this album due to Gabriel leaving, but as long as it has Steve Hackett, I'm happy, so my run would be from Nursery Crime to A Trick in the Tail. One of the first bands that came to mind when I thought of this topic was Deep Purple. Along with inventing metal with Sabbath, they released some of the best albums of the 70s. In rock, Fireball and Machine Head easily get in, as do the Mark III albums, but then you remember Who Do We Think We Are exists. This album is just bad. Gillan and Glover didn't want to be in the band anymore and shows they weren't trying. Nightwish were another band I thought could make it, but in my opinion, Century Child is just a smidge below a great album, which breaks the run from Oceanborn to Dark Passion Play, which is a shame. Scorpions fit here with their run from In Trance to Animal Magnetism, from their proto-metal on In Trance and Virgin Killer, to the more commercial sounds of Animal Magnetism. This is a great and pretty underrated 5-album run. Finally, one of my favourite bands of all time, Thin Lizzy, had to make this list. You could basically go with any run from Fighting to Thunder and Lightning, but I pick the first 5 of the run. Fighting has the start of the band's use of harmonizing guitar solos, Jailbreak is the band's commercial peak, Johnny the Fox is probably the most experimental album of this era, Bad Reputation is the natural peak for the classic lineup with the best songwriting, and Black Rose has Gary Moore coming in to make yet another classic album. While I feel bad for leaving out both the Snowy White and John Sykes eras, this is another run that goes down as one of the best of all time. That's all the runs I can think of for the moment without this video going on for hours on end. Do you think Who Do We Think We Are is the best Deep Purple album and I'm dead wrong for thinking it's bad? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what runs I missed out on, or if any bands I mentioned should or shouldn't be in the running for this test. But with that, stay safe, stay happy, and stay metal.